Since ancient times, great philosophers and thinkers have always asked a fundamental question. Does God exist? How can we know it? Some philosophers try to answer this question by looking at the world around us using observation and experience. However, Saint Anselm of Canterbury proposed a different approach. He believed that God's existence can be proven through reason alone, simply by reflecting on the concept of God. In his famous work Proslogion, Anselm describes God as that than which nothing greater can be conceived. In other words, God is the best, the greatest possible being that the human mind can imagine. Before we get into this argument, let us clarify why it is called ontological argument. Ontology is the study of being, what it means to exist. Anselm uses God as a pure being. From this concept alone, he argues the existence of God. The ontological argument is very unique because it does not rely on empirical evidence, that is, without relying on our senses or observation. Normally, when we want to prove that something exists, we need to observe it in the real world. For example, if you want to prove that animals, mountains, viruses exist, we must investigate them through experience. However, some truths can be known simply by analyzing the concept itself. For example, we know that a square circle cannot exist because the idea itself is logically contradictory. Similarly, the ontological argument claims that the concept of God logically implies God's existence. Now, if the argument succeeds, then saying God does not exist would be as contradictory as saying a square circle exists. Anselm begins his argument with the very definition of God as the greatest conceivable being. He argues that even someone who denies God's existence can still understand this concept when they hear it. Therefore, the idea of God exists in the human mind. Anselm then introduces a very important idea. A being that exists in reality is greater than a being that exists only in a mind. For example, imagine a painting. A painting that exists in the artist's mind is good, but it is more complete if it exists in reality. Anselm applies this reasoning to God. If God existed only in a mind, then we could imagine something greater, a being that exists both in the mind and in reality. If we could imagine something greater than God, then God would not truly be the greatest being. Therefore, Anselm concludes that God cannot exist only in the mind. If God is the greatest possible being, God must exist in reality. The argument does not end here. A monk named Gaunilo of Marmoutiers criticized Saint Anselm's argument. Gaunilo argued that Anselm's reasoning seems to move from the existence of an idea in the mind to the existence of something in reality, which appears problematic. To illustrate this, he proposed a famous example, the perfect island. Gaunilo asked us to imagine the greatest possible island, more perfect than any other island. Using Anselm's reasoning, the perfect island exists as an idea in our mind. An island that exists both in a mind and in reality would be greater than the one that exists only in the mind. Therefore, according to this reasoning, the perfect island must exist in reality. Gaunilo believed that this shows Anselm's reasoning is flawed. If the logic were correct, we could prove the existence of many imaginary things such as a perfect island, perfect cities, but clearly imagining something perfect does not make it real. Now what to do? Saint Anselm's respond that this example does not work. The reason is that islands do not have a maximum level of perfection. An island can always be improved by adding better weather, more beaches, more fruits, and more beauty. Therefore, the idea of a perfect island is not logically precise. According to Anselm, the concept of God is different because it involves great making properties that have maximum limit, such as omniscience, knowing everything, omnipotence, having all possible power, perfect goodness. These qualities have an absolute maximum, unlike the qualities of an island. Because of this, Anselm argues that the concept of God is coherent, while the idea of a perfect island is not. Thus, The argument continues to inspire philosophical debate about whether reason alone can prove the existence of God.